Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here with my fellow panelists to talk about L1 as the foundational infrastructure for tokenization here at TEAMZ. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Annabelle Huang, the co-founder and CEO of LTS Labs. We build high-performance, institutional-grade blockchain infrastructure to abstract complexity, to customize your own infrastructure to build tokenization, payment, or other use cases on-chain. I'll give the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Robbie Coleman. I'm head of APAC for Litecoin Foundation and one of the directors of Litecoin Foundation globally. Our mission is to help further the development and adoption of Litecoin, which is a decentralized currency and the oldest surviving currency outside Bitcoin.
Thanks, Annabelle. And good morning, everyone. I'm Suhan Zhao, head of APAC at Aptos Lab. I'm leading the regional growth strategy and partnerships. And previously, I spent almost a decade in banking, TradFi, before I moved into the Web3 space. Aptos is a layer 1 public blockchain. It was born at Facebook. It was founded by the core members from the Facebook Libra DM project. And we partner with financial institutions, payment firms, enterprises to enable the movement of real money, asset, and tradings on the public blockchain.
おはようございます。Good morning, everybody. My name is Taro. ミッドナイトデジャパンの日本の代表の木村と申します。今日はよろしくお願いいたします。So my name is Taro. I am the country manager for Midnight Foundation Japan. My role here in Japan is institutionalizing the capabilities of blockchain capabilities with enterprise, building out a community, as well as making sure that the ecosystem partnership in Japan here is able to adopt blockchain technologies in collaborations with all of the chains that are coming out in the blockchain, but especially with the ability of a privacy layer to it itself. So very excited to be on this chain. Thanks.
Good morning, guys. My name is Adrian Li. I'm originally from Canada. I'm based in Tokyo now. I'm the Asia EcoDev liaison for the Ethereum Foundation. Ethereum, as many of you might know, is the longest lasting smart contract chain out there with the deepest liquidity. And really just happy to be here with everyone to talk about what the technology can do for enterprises and institutions around the world. Thanks, guys.
Amazing. We have a star panelist representing different layer 1s on the stage. And most of us are based in Asia, Singapore, Tokyo here locally, and Australia.
Australia, that's right.
Yeah, so while I think this topic should be discussed with a very global perspective, but obviously we want to focus a little bit of the APAC landscape as well. Just to set the stage, wanted to ask everyone here, what do you think the appetite for tokenization, either from an institutional perspective or actually a retail demand? Where do we actually stand today? We start with you, Robbie.
I guess I'm going to have a different answer. I'd actually defer to these guys first, and then I'll jump in, because Litecoin's slightly different to the others.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Happy to start first. I think it's a very good question, and we often heard this question being raised by institutions or the market as well. I think at this point, we have a regulator-backed research which quantifies the demand and also direction of travel. So last year end, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority just concluded the phase 2 of EHKD program. And Aptos was selected as the only public chain to participate in this program alongside BCG and Hang Seng Bank. So in this pilot, we focus on testing the settlement of tokenized fund transaction using digital money, which includes EHKD, tokenized deposit on Aptos blockchain. And the results was published last year. It shows there's enhanced efficiency, increased investor risk, and also security, and also reduced counterparty risk of all these investor transactions. And subsequently, BCG conducted a survey with over 500 investors across different markets, Hong Kong, mainland China. And the result demonstrates that more than 60% of all these investors actually told us they are willing and open to double down their fund allocation, given there's instant settlement and 24/7 market access. So the demand is very clear here. So appetite from institution, from the retail is present. And right now, across different markets in the Asia, we also see there's increased regulatory clarity and there's more confidence when the infrastructure is ready to support with high performance, solid, and I believe the demand across all will just increase.
I got to agree with that as well. I don't have the APAC remit. I have a Japan remit for now, and I think having been in Japan for a long time, Japan has been at the forefront of regulatory, obviously, infrastructure for blockchain, and so I think that's given us an ability to think forwardly around how we want to tokenize it. I think regularly when we think about tokenization, a lot of people think about, okay, well, it's going to be RWA, real estate, or financial assets. I think of it a way further than that. There's multiple different ways of doing tokenization that we're already having discussions with. How do you monetize data? And that data, how do you then tokenize that on chain? The other thing, how do you take IP? I think Aptos has done this as well with other large IP holders. Japan has one of the highest IPs, the most lucrative ideas. How do you unlock that? And so I think we've gone through this stage from 2017, 2020, where we were going through the concept of how do we figure out how to bring this all on chain. And so I think the appetite is absolutely real. And I think what's great is the fact I think institutions have gone through a phase one, maybe a phase two of trying to bring things on blockchain. But I think where we are now, as you were saying, investors have now started to pick this up, and they're very, very interested in it. And I think all of us are trying to find ways to unlock this mechanism in itself. Us personally at Midnight, we feel that the fact that Japan is a very regulatory and compliant organization. When you do any contracts with any Japanese companies, they're going to ask you about your GDPR. Like, how are you compliant in itself? That's where it even starts. So when you try to do anything transparent on the blockchain, you're going to hit some of these regulatory challenges in itself of bringing IP onto the blockchain itself. And Japan is already forward thinking there. And I think that's the biggest unlock for us to be able to engage with customers and saying, how do we bring you on this journey in blockchain together by providing you the necessary infrastructure? Some people don't need, let's just say, privacy in itself, but some organizations absolutely demand that privacy features in itself. And we as the entire industry have now started to both mature, I think, right? The wild, wild west of crypto back in 2017, we're now maturing, and the institutions now are starting to realize that they can start playing on the same level ground as well. So I think we're in a really good position.
Yeah, so going back to the original question of what does that energy look like in the retail side versus institutional or enterprise? I think it's, retail is obviously very cyclical, right? And we see that perhaps in this year or these few months at least, the retail energy has subsided quite a bit. But that's we've seen that happen over 10 plus years in the crypto space, and that's nothing new, right? What's more exciting is what everyone is talking about here. In terms of the institutional development, the legal side, the regulatory side, and maybe personally, I come from a legal background, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think there's so much excitement right now from the institutional side because of all these regulations coming out, right? Clarity Act is just around the corner. Hong Kong stablecoin licensing, again, just around the corner. I mean, a lot of these things have been just around the corner for quite a while, but it is still, it feels very much like just around the corner. And I think a lot of the enterprises and institutions feel that way, and that's why they're continuing to put in a lot of energy and resources into learning, trying PLCs, and maybe sometimes going beyond PLCs and pushing things into production. So that's something that I think is really exciting. Retail side, that's a completely different conversation. But if we look past that, there's definitely a growing demand for blockchain technology across basically all of the large industries out there, whether it be banking, institutional, legal, supply chain, heavy industries even. This is all something that we've been seeing, I think, across the board.
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, and I think they're all amazing answers, and that's why I wanted the experts to actually answer before me so I could say something else. But from a Litecoin perspective, from an institutional Litecoin perspective, it's really been about exposure to the asset. So giving new, I guess, retail investors and then, I guess, maybe more high net worth individuals access to the real world asset of being Litecoin or the real asset Litecoin and direct exposure through things like ETPs and ETFs. So Litecoin was the third to get a registered ETF in the United States, and it was one of the first to get an ETP in Europe, and it'll be one of the first in Australia. So I'm really excited about the institutional sort of growth of I guess, the ETPs, ETFs, and also the treasuries. So there's a lot of digital asset treasuries now, and yeah, so it's very exciting from that perspective.
No, thank you guys for the answer. It is quite interesting. I think in terms of tokenization, right, it's tokenization of any kind of assets. Could be financial, could be data, could be anything else. And I think the next question I want to focus on a bit more in terms of how infrastructure actually has matured over the past almost 2 decades to allow institutions to actually feel comfortable moving any sort of assets on chain. I think we talked a little bit about high performance, we talked a little bit about privacy or regulatory position, but yeah, I wanted to maybe dive a little deeper on this. Maybe Adrian?
Yeah, so there's like definitely, so I used to work at Consensus in 2017 to 2020, and during that time, we actually talked to a lot of enterprises as well. So a lot of history kind of repeats itself, right? Like at the time, people were also talking about let's move beyond PLCs and let's do something real. It's almost 10 years ago now. And it was very exciting then, it's still exciting now. I think the infrastructure has changed so much, right? In terms of the tooling, the things that are available to developers, the things that you can do on the privacy side with zero knowledge proofs, programmable cryptography. The advancements in the technology and the infrastructure around it has given way to a lot more. It allows us to have use cases that were not possible before, right? And I think that works very well with enterprise and institutions because who cares about privacy more than enterprise institutions, right? I think the regular person doesn't really care. Especially if you go to some countries like the U.S., they check your ID when you buy alcohol. You show people your ID and it has your address on it and everything, right? So like. Clearly, the retail doesn't care about privacy as much as companies and institutions do because obviously it's a completely different level of need, right? So on that front, and also from the, I guess, again, from a more human side, the infrastructure of standards has also changed quite a bit, right? Swift has ISO 20022, and then we have a bunch of ERC standards on the Ethereum side. And how are we going to match some of these standards to existing compliance infrastructures, right? Like those things are being heavily worked on by a lot of our large organizations and startups too, mind you. But everyone is really coming together. The whole ecosystem is maturing from a standards perspective because at the end of the day, if we need to interop with each other, we need to have standards that everyone agrees on and standards that plug into more traditional ecosystems as well. So that, to me, is like the really exciting thing about infrastructure as it's matured over the 10 years I've been in this industry.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree. I mean, 10 years ago, it was nowhere near as user-friendly to even have a wallet to swap things. The user experiences from a retail perspective has been phenomenal. I think for institutions, it's probably the trust that's been earned over the last 15, 16 years that this space has actually existed, where it's like, the retail investors have almost done the penetration testing for, some of the security flaws, some of the privacy, all these things which, historically would have started from an institution and like been worked on internally and then brought to the consumer. It's almost like the consumers have done the penetration testing for 10 years, and then institutions have seen, it's performed pretty well, or it's only been the downtimes this, that, and we can improve it by this much. So I think it's actually almost flipped in the way that it's matured.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think as a whole now, basically I think institutions have started to look at us as a bolt-on, right? We used to be a place that we're going to replace old legacy systems. We are going to be the standard in itself. And I think as an industry now, we've started to transfer into a stage where it's like, hey, look, what can we do to bolt on to your current payment system, your POS systems that you're using to make payments on that? How can we bolt on our current capabilities interoperably into that so that it's a seamless use case? And so we're having those discussions right now with Japanese players that are obviously doing, credit systems here that are doing it, that want to use it, but want it as a bolt-on, not as a complete replacement of their current infrastructure in itself. And so I think we are really in an interesting point here where I think we are going to have to abstract away, whether it be just chains as a whole. It's like at the end of the day, what the user wants, what the customer wants in itself, how can we all enable that? And whether that be the highest TPS is very, very important for this particular asset class and this customer in itself, then they may be leaning on to Ethereum. They may be leaning on to Solana or Aptos in itself. If they're looking for security as a whole and they don't need the TPS basically in itself. I think sometimes we get caught up in this mode around, oh, our chain can do this, our chain can do that, but the customer at the end of the day may not care, right? And so we've got to make sure that we are building out the capabilities to bolt on to the systems that they have right now to enable what we're trying to bring the next billion users. We're not going to build it out of the crypto community. We're going to have to bring in the legacy infrastructures into this in itself. And that's where I think infrastructure plays a key as a bolt-on.
Totally agree with all the points being shared on the stage. So I think some of the best financial products in the market right now are invisible. So we are trying to offer a better consumer user experience through the blockchain. And the users probably don't have to feel, or they don't need to know or understand this is on the blockchain, right? These are mainstream users. They are not crypto users. So again, to the point about the importance of trust, totally agree on that as well. I think if I look at 2 years ago, or even 18 months, 12 months ago, when we engage with institutions, large MNCs, they typically ask, should we explore Web3? What's your advice? But these days, they are asking another very different question, straightforward. Where is the proof that you can show me this work for my customers? Or can I have the confidence that I'm going to run a regulated product on your blockchain? So that's the importance of trust, right? And confidence, trust is earned through the evidence. And at this point, Aptos has over 2 billion assets on chain. And most of these capital are being managed by some of the world's largest asset managers, BlackRock, Franklin Templeton. And these are the institutions who actually offer the highest standards of due diligence in the market. And beyond high performance, Aptos offer sub-second finality, extremely low cost, just a fraction of a cent. I think beyond that, what matters even more is the compliance, control, on-chain, security. And we do have the architecture to address all these friction points, concerns. Compliance is being embedded on-chain, and we have built verification at the protocol level. So we understand that to lots of institutions, this is very meaningful, especially when they want to run a regulated product.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love the answer that we're building infrastructure as an enhancement, not a complete replacement of the legacy rails. And I think that's really maybe a mindset shift from maybe 20 years ago, the role of Bitcoin, to what a pragmatic approach that we're taking today. And I think we all agree that tokenization is a trend, infrastructure is getting ready, but if we look at it a little deeper in terms of, okay, now we have tokenized an asset or issued an asset on chain, then what happens with the remainder of the life cycle? What about trading? What about settlement? And how do your perspective, L1s, really support trading and settlement at scale? Maybe we start with Taro this time. Sure, Suhan then.
Sure. I think we talk a lot about issuance, putting assets on chain, and nowadays we hear a lot from the market, investors. So what's going to happen after this asset is put on chain? So I think that issuance is always just step number one, the beginning of this whole life cycle of asset. Trading, settlement should exist, just as the issuance layer on the blockchain as well. And that will offer the seamless entire life cycle of the asset. And this is the reason why Aptos actually incubated Decibel, which is fully on-chain trading venue. and just went on mainnet over 1 month ago. So every order match settlement is being executed directly on-chain. It's fully transparent and verifiable. And talking about user experience, any user who trade on Decibel, so they can actually use any chains, any accounts they have money in already. And they can actually connect their wallet from any networks. So that's the level of seamlessness, just like Web2, and they shouldn't feel much of a difference. So I think talking about layer one, what we can support, what should we do about this entire tradings? Issuance is a good start, but we should also support the entire life cycle, including trading, settlement, as well as compliance control on blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, so similar to Bitcoin, I mean, a lot of the issuance and a lot of the protocol was, you know, it's irreversible, so it was baked in from the get-go. You know, there's only ever going to be 84 million Litecoin ever mined, and I think that's 2071. So that's a while. Oh no, it's longer. 2171, because it's 2151 is the last Bitcoin. Yes. So it's got a built-in deflationary mechanism similar to Bitcoin. There's a halving every 4 years approximately. From I guess the issuance standpoint, the trading standpoint, like Litecoin was designed and it functions still to this day as a currency. It's a very good currency. 2.5 minutes settlement time. Over its 14 and a half years, it's never been down. So unlike a Visa, MasterCard, no offense to anyone in the audience from Visa, MasterCard, it's never been down. The network has never been down for a single minute for 14 and a half years. 380 million transactions have been made on chain. So it functions very well as a currency. And over that 14 and a half years, the mean transaction fee has been less than 0.5 cent. So that's including the very bullish times and the peak periods where, you know, the transaction fees were much higher. That's the mean over 14 and a half years. So from our perspective, I think it's fulfilling its purpose very well. And, you know, we've got a really exciting ecosystem being built around that. But from Litecoin as like a pure layer one, it's functioning as a currency as designed.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when talking about tokenization, because like tokenization has been such a hot thing for like many years. Like throughout all the cycles, tokenization has always been at the forefront of a lot of discussions, especially with enterprises. But one thing to realize is like there's no point in tokenizing something if no one's going to use it, right? If there's no distribution, if there's no liquidity, there's no point. Like you can build an airplane, but if you don't have a pilot and passengers, it's just a chunk of metal on the ground, right? So if you guys go to rwa.xyz, actually, it has a lot of data about real world assets on different chains. It's really funny. There's a tab you can choose between the amount that's been distributed versus the amount that's just represented. So a lot of projects like to put a lot of things on chain, and it's represented on chain, it's tokenized on chain. But can you actually do any kind of settlement on it? Is there actually like deep liquidity, right? Deepest liquidity is, of course, it's always been Ethereum in terms of distribution and all those things. But like I think that one thing to think about is not just having something that's a token and it's on a chain and you're done, because that's really the easy part. The hard part is getting other people to buy into it, to use it, right? And to do that, I think you need a lot of trust and a lot of understanding about that go-to-market strategy, about who your target audience is, and what are the things that they care about, right? In terms of the history of the protocol, its censorship resistance, how much you can rely on it as a project, so that it doesn't like turn off just because maybe a government doesn't like it, for example.
And Adrian, that sounds really like utility. Like, what is the utility of the thing that's being tokenized?
Exactly, because like you put it up there, there's no utility. Like the airplane analogy, there's no point, right? It's nice, it's an art project. Maybe you get a bonus from your boss, but we're here to go deeper with our conversations and our work in life, right? So.
I agree with what you're saying right now with regards to liquidity. At the end of the day, you need liquidity within the industry as a whole. And when you have so much different asset class coming into the ecosystem and new asset classes, we already have a lot of asset class, but we're expecting new asset classes to come in. As you're saying, you're going to have to rely on areas of pools of liquidity that are already there, right? And so Ethereum, as Adrian was saying, has a large set of liquidity in itself. We at Midnight don't necessarily think that we're going to supply the most liquidity for tokenized IP in itself. I don't think that's necessarily the case. We can partner with other ecosystems that have the large liquidities in itself. And so I think what Adrian said is correct. I also love the fact that he was saying a thing about trust. I think ultimately what trust equates to here in Japan is compliance and regulatory in itself. And I want to be a bit biased because I'm from Midnight. We are a ZK. We are a compliant, programmable, layer 1 blockchain in itself. But I think when you want to tokenize in itself, depending on whatever asset that you have in itself, we've got to remember, for example, if Kadokawa here, which is the largest manga, one of the largest manga companies that are here in itself, they have rules around how IP has to be regulated here in Japan. It's not a blockchain regulations that you have to comply. You need to be compliant directly with that, law around IP here in Japan. How do we get there is basically the key here in itself. So liquidity is one, but per asset class, they all have needs and specific regulatory requirements that you need to be able to match and customize to in itself. And I think that's the biggest breakthrough that we're going to be able to have and the discussions that we continue to want to have with the customers.
Great. I think we only have time to wrap up with the last question. So I think we would set the stage. We talked about the current trend. What about looking ahead in the future? Obviously, we're talking about more assets being issued on chain. Maybe we move to deeper liquidity, but maybe there's multiple asset classes being issued on multiple chains. How do we address the fragmentation of liquidity and the cross-chain side of it? And what you guys are doing specifically to really enable the next billion-dollar assets or next billion users on chain?
I'll be quick, and I actually already mentioned this, but I think standards are the most important thing across the board, right? Because fragmentation, reliability, trust, getting people on the same page, that's what standards are about. Standards are moving really fast, and I think, if anyone's interested, come talk to me. I can point you in the right direction, financial standards, transaction payment standards, there's a whole bunch of different things that, that people are working on that, I think is really important for this.
From, I guess, the billion user standpoint, the thing that Litecoin's going to focus on is leaning into its strengths. And so looking at remittance, cross-border, and specifically focusing, in regions where censorship is a real problem. And so, because we've got optional privacy as well. So that will be trying to onboard as many people with the greatest utility and user experience.
I think that fragmentation across products, fragmentation across asset class, you can't ignore that. It's just going to happen. So when that asset class needs a specific use case, how are we collaborating together to be able to make sure that asset class can live on chain? Technically, we're all trying to be on chain. That is the magic that we're going to have to work on in itself. And so how do you bolt that on together? How do we work with it? Charles came from Ethereum, so he understands that ecosystem. How do we work together to be able to provide the best use case for Midnight on Ethereum for our customers basically in itself? Sometimes it may not be a Midnight thing in itself. How do we do that at Aptos? How do we do it at Litecoin? I think that's the biggest unlock. So I don't think we can stop fragmentation. It's going to happen itself. But when they come into the blockchain, how can we provide a unified, seamless capability for assets to flow, bring liquidity over here, bring compliance over here, bring fast settlement over here? That's the unlock, I think, is going to happen.
Point. It definitely demonstrates the importance of high performance of any layer one. I think to the original question, so if we take one step back and we look around, what's the most successful use case of tokenization today? By large scale, digital money. And it already shows that digital money runs multi-rail. That's the future. CBDC, stable coins, token deposit, these will just coexist. And looking at Aptos, today we have about 1.8 billion stablecoin market cap, and we have the fastest USDT growth across all chains since beginning of 2025. So that's an indication of consolidation versus fragmentation. And it also shows that it's the market that selects the infrastructure, which they think is ready.
Amazing. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you guys again for your insights, and thank you, TEAMZ, for having us.
Thank you very much. And thank you.
Thank you very much for the panel to join us. Let's take a quick picture for you.